Continuing Green Lantern, a celebration of 75 years, we now come to a series of space adventures. Now, according to the information on the cover page, these issues appeared in The Flash between 1975 and 1976. I guess there must have been some point in The Flash when Green Arrow was sharing some of the space in that magazine. So these are, I guess because he's sharing space in the magazine, these stories are short, but they put together, they make a longer continuous story. And we get 3 mini issues here about Green Lantern encountering these mysterious beings called the Olis Ravagers, who are going around wrecking havoc for some unknown reason. Now, the stories themselves are not great, but there's a mystery here. Who are these Olis Ravagers? Why are they going around wrecking havoc? And you read this hoping to find the mystery, but then the story just abruptly stops and we go into the next issue. So, yeah, I don't know what the editors were thinking here. I mean, obviously, whenever you do a compilation book like this, there's always a tension between what to include and what to leave out. You can't put in everything. But what's the point of just putting in half a story here, huh? Especially since the story seems to be just built on a mystery. Wouldn't have been, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the point of including these stories in this collection is. But then we go to Green Lantern from the 80s, May 1985. Now, as I said at the beginning of the previous video, I didn't really read many Green Lantern comics from the 1980s. I got into comics in the early 90s, and people were not... It was difficult to get the back issues of the Green Lantern in the 1980s at that time. But the style of storytelling here is reminiscent to me of some of the other 1980s comic books I've read. It's building on the continuity that has come before. So there are a lot of things being referenced here, like something we were talking about in one of the previous issues, the staged assassination attempt of a senator, which John Stewart foiled here. But although everything is still in continuity at this point, even the cheesy stuff from the 60s and 70s, we're beginning to build a more mature, complex story for a more mature audience. And I just always found it fascinating the way they were juggling all those plot threads. And even though I only understand half of the references that are in here, I find it fascinating the way they're juggling all these plot threads. So, for whatever reason, Hal Jordan has retired. So John Stewart, the previous backup Green Lantern, is now the main Green Lantern, but Hal Jordan is very much in the story. He's retired because I guess he wants to spend time with his girlfriend, Carol Ferris. Meanwhile, Green Arrow is really upset about this whole thing. He thinks that Carol Ferris is ruining Green Lantern's life, and he's not quite sure what to do about it. There's some sort of mysterious being called the Predator, which is tracking Hal Jordan, and he needs to find out more information about it. There's an ambitious young reporter who's getting information about the new John Stewart Green Lantern, and there's her boss who's concerned that she's putting too much of herself in the news. There's somebody from the old Green Lantern Corps who is now training John Stewart, who has a history with Hal Jordan. John Stewart really admires Hal Jordan, but she knows more of Hal Jordan's story. So she says here, better that you do not know that Hal Jordan would push me to abandon love for the sake of the Corps, and then abandon the Corps himself for the sake of his own love. Better that you think your predecessor is an honorable man. So I guess Hal Jordan has not always been acting honorably in his romantic relationships. Hal Hal Jordan is also having problems with his old sidekick, Pie Face. Although we don't call him Pie Face anymore because it's the 1980s. Tom. Hi, Tom. And then still mad at me for not consulting him about my quitting the Corps, I guess. Is that what Tom's mad about, or is there something else going on? Meanwhile, where that's going on, John Stewart still doesn't know that Hal Jordan is the other Green Lantern. He doesn't know Hal Jordan's secret identity. But the other Green Lantern, who is now disguised as a black woman, greets him with a kiss, which confuses everybody and leads to awkward moments on both sides, with Carol Ferris and John Stewart in separate panels both asking, what was that all about? So this, I've said before, maybe in previous videos, that comic books can be like soap operas for men. And reading this issue from 1985, it struck me that perhaps this was the era when comic books were peak soap opera-ish for men. When you had to remember all this continuity where there were all these plot threads, relationship things, stuff being gradually teased. And, you know, I would just love to just read more of this era. You know, to just have a collection of the Green Lantern comics from the 1980s and keep reading through the storyline or read the comics that preceded it. Because this is the kind of thing that made me fall in love with comics. Even though, as a newcomer, when I first started reading comics in the 1990s, you didn't understand half of these references. Just the intrigue that there was this deeper story out there that you were gradually getting the pieces of. The thing that maybe puts a little bit of a damper on this, in my mind, is this is 1985. So we're just 1 year away from 1986, which is when DC is going to start monkeying around with its continuity in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then ever since then, it's always unclear what is still canon and what is not. And it to my mind, spoils a little bit of this idea of this decades-long ongoing story, ongoing soap opera. But I believe in most DC titles, Crisis didn't affect the main continuity that much. Most stuff was still canon. So presumably all of these relationships were still canon after Crisis. I don't know. Okay, then speaking of post-Crisis, we go to the new Justice League, rebooted after Crisis, in which Guy Gardner is now one of the founding, well, not founding. He's not founding because it's well established that this is a new incarnation of the previous Justice League. But Guy Gardner is a founding member of the new Justice League, if that makes sense. Now, I had to go to Wikipedia a little bit to get some of this information, but Guy Gardner got a major reboot around this time, where he was rebooted as just being a complete asshole character. And according to Wikipedia, the reason that the writers did that is because, in their opinion, Guy Gardner, up until this point, had just been a useless character. He had been in the background. He had always been Hal Jordan's backup. He, I guess, had a very bland personality with nothing interesting about it. So somebody decided, well, if we're going to make a character interesting, here's a character that could really use a makeover. And I think the in-universe reason for his abrupt change of personality is there was some sort of car accident which gave him brain damage or something like that. Interestingly enough, once Guy Gardner as an asshole became a huge hit with comic book fans in the 1980s and 90s, and I guess maybe subsequently, the writers regretted having used the character of Guy Gardner because Guy Gardner was a pre-existing character, they didn't get any of the royalties from this complete makeover they had done, where they had just chosen a new character to make the asshole Green Lantern, then they would have gotten the royalties from it. But they screwed that one up by using a pre-existing character. So anyways, this is the new Guy Gardner. As far as I know, is this the first issue where the new Guy Gardner appears in his new persona? It might be. I actually used to have this issue back in the day. This one I did find in the 3 for $1 bin in the early 90s. Even though it's a first issue, I guess not all these first issues retain their value. I had a few issues from the all-new Justice League, which was noted for, well, you can see here, it's not the Justice League that we know. So it's kind of a, one way to put it would be the second-tier Justice League. But, you know, a lot of these guys are pretty big heroes in their own right? Captain Marvel, a.k.a. Shazam, Blue Beetle. This was post-Crisis, so DC was integrating some of the characters that it had previously acquired the rights to, and so Blue Beetle was from Charleston Comics, Captain Marvel was from Fawcett Comics. Now they're all integrated into the DC universe. But yeah, there are also minor characters in here as well. But anyways, minor characters, but with a new emphasis on comedy. So they're all arguing. Guy Gardner being the asshole is a perfect comedic character here. Somebody to just get the other characters all mad and acts like a child and just fights everyone. But he's got an interesting relationship with Batman. Batman, who is the one person who can control Guy Gardner just from his sheer force of personality. Now, this story is not a Green Lantern story. It's a Justice League story. But I think it was included in this collection because Guy Gardner didn't have his own comic book at this time. I don't think so. So I think this is maybe the first appearance of the new Guy Gardner, and this is where Guy Gardner would have his stories for a while. So yeah, I had read this before, but it was fun going back to it. It was a fun comedic story, and again, makes me want to read more of these. So, you know, is there a collection of the all-new Justice League out there somewhere? I'd love to read more of these stories. They're fun. Okay. Then, Green Lantern Twilight. Now, this story happened in March of 1994, which is during that 2-year period when I was actively collecting comics and paying attention to what was going on. I did not have a subscription to Green Lantern at that time, but I would occasionally buy Green Lantern comics when I would go into the comic book store. And it turned out, at least in terms of Green Lantern continuity, I picked maybe a bad time to get into Green Lantern comics, because the year I started reading Green Lantern comics was the year he went crazy. So, this is Emerald Twilight 3, which, actually, this is the first time I've read this, but I had, at the time, Green Lantern 48 and 49. So I had the first 2 issues of the Emerald Twilight trilogy, not the third one. No particular reason why I didn't buy the third one. I think maybe I just didn't make it to the comic book store that week. And also, you know, comic books were expensive. This is $2.95. I was getting, I believe, $10 a week, maybe at that point, for helping out my grandfather around the house. So you had to husband your resources wisely. But yeah, I had the 2 previous issues leading into this in my collection. And these are the issues where Hal Jordan goes crazy. Now, so yeah, it was interesting for me to finally read issue 50 after, you know, these kind of 40 some years, 40 years, 30 years, 30 years of only having only ever having read issue 48 and 49 and knowing issue 50 only by reputation. In terms of the editorial choices for what gets included in this collection and what doesn't, I kind of think maybe they should have included issues 48 and 49 as well. And I know you can't include everything in a volume like this, but it would only have expanded the page count of this edition by 48 pages. I think you could have just made this edition a little bit thicker and included those pages. Because if you're going through Green Lantern's history, you want to see why he goes crazy, right? You want to see those issues that tell that story. But I'm thinking of it from a reader standpoint. From an editorial standpoint, maybe DC Comics is perfectly happy just tweaking my curiosity and making me go out and buy one of these other volumes where I can read the whole story later. So, maybe that's their game here. Less complete storytelling and more kind of teasing me to go out and buy other volumes type storytelling. Anyways, in Green Lantern 48, Green Lantern is really upset because his hometown, Coast City, has been destroyed. This is something that's happened over in another storyline, the death and rebirth of Superman, whereas a fallout from that story, Coast City got completely destroyed, Green Lantern's hometown. Green Lantern tries to rebuild it with his Green Lantern rings and then gets chewed out by the Green Lantern Guardians for misusing his ring for personal purposes, at which point he just goes crazy. Now, when I first read this, and I was, 15, 16, when, I think maybe 16, no, 15 maybe, when those issues were first coming out. I didn't quite know what to make of it, but I was intrigued by the idea. There's a lot of this in comic books, and I think it appeals to younger readers, where you think, wow, he was a good guy, but just had one tragic event happen to him, and then it made him go crazy, and now he's a super villain. There's a kind of Shakespearean drama about that, or Greek tragedy, or something about, how any one of us could be a villain, a bad guy, if we're only just kind of one disaster away from going crazy. There's a lot of stories like that in comics where characters go from good to bad or bad to good because of some traumatic event. But as I've grown older and as the internet has become a thing, I've learned to understand that this was a really hated storyline by Green Lantern fans. And with a little bit of reflection, I can see why. Because people don't change suddenly like that. I think people rarely change at all once their personality is established in their mid-teens. Certainly that's been my experience. You mature a little bit, the rough edges get taken off a little bit, you lose some of your impulsiveness, etc. But, what's your experience? How much do people change over the years once they become a stable adult? So the idea of this Green Lantern, who we had all known for years, or comic book readers had known for years, as being this basically good guy, to just snapping and becoming this psychotic villain, I think was a bridge too far for a lot of readers. Now, to be fair, I think DC Comics did retcon this later and said that it actually wasn't really him There was a parasite that had control of his brain and was driving him mad. Now, I don't think that was the explanation at the time. I think that was a later retcon by writers who realized that this was a bridge too far for their readers. So, depending on how much credit you give them for the retcon, or if you want to judge this by the standards of how it was presented to readers at the time, would affect how you were evaluating this, I suppose. Yeah, as always, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Did you like this change where Hal Jordan becomes a supervillain? So he fights Sinestro here. Now, in the previous issue, issue 49, which at one point I had in my collection, Hal Jordan goes through and destroys the whole Green Lantern Corps. It looks like he kills them all, which I thought was pretty hardcore when I was reading that as a 15-year-old. Although we get a line in here somewhere. Oh, yeah. I didn't kill the Corps. Just took their rings because I needed their power. I left them enough to survive. Okay, so I that wasn't clear in the previous issue, but I guess we get that clarification here. But he's destroyed the Green Lantern Corps. So the Guardians free Sinestro, Hal Jordan's villain, and former mentor, as it is in this current community, is established, as Sinestro alludes to when he's telling stories here to Hal Jordan. Sinestro in this issue is very chatty. He's mocking Hal Jordan, telling all these stories. And it ends, I guess, spoiler, with Sinestro getting killed. Although, according to Wikipedia, later continuity would establish that he's just faking his death. But, again, that's a retcon. Kilowog, you're one of the Green Lantern Corps characters, is also killed. I mean, he later comes back, but in comics, everyone later comes back, huh? So, and then Hal Jordan gets the powers, and he's going to go off and become the villain of the 0 Hour storyline, but that's a different storyline, which introduces us to the new Green Lantern, which is the very next issue, 951. So, yeah, I did not read any of the issues with the new Green Lantern. I was aware of him, because it was being talked about all across the DC titles. And also, he became integrated very soon after this in the New Titans comic, which I've talked about the Teen Titans a lot on this channel. I had a subscription to their comic at that time. It was not one of their better periods. So he has, I guess, the misfortune to join the New Titans during one of their worst periods. But anyways, it's funny reading this now and seeing how completely 90s this was. I mean, they were really trying to appeal to the teen market here with a new hip Green Lantern, and he's a total 90s Gen X slacker type guy. And it even starts with what was a popular storytelling technique in the 90s, but has since become mocked as a 90s cliche. Starts off with him narrating, "My name's Kyle Rayner, and I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe you can tell that. Unfortunately, I'm discovering a little experience can get a guy killed." So, this is the 90s cliche where it's like there's a scene, then it freezes, then there's a record scratch, and then the voiceover says, "Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got there. Well, it all started a few days ago when," and then we get, it all started a few days ago when, and it shows here with his origins. And yeah, I mean, look at this guy. Look at his hair. He's a graphic artist who's slacking and doesn't have full-time work. He's just totally 90s guy. And he's got his girlfriend here who's trying to straighten him out. I mean, look at this. So, by the way, his girlfriend is going to become rather infamous in comic book conversations, comic book lore, for being the head in the refrigerator girl. Now, I didn't actually read these issues. This was after I stopped reading comics. But one of the supervillains that Green Lantern has kills his girlfriend and puts her head in the refrigerator. And here it is as a flashback here. And this was... I'm not sure about the whole fan community, but at least a vocal part of the fan community on the internet, whose blogs I was following at the time, people like Occasional Superheroine, etc., didn't like this kind of storytelling, where a woman character is brutally killed off for no reason other than to add trauma and traumatic depth to the male character's story. So it became emblematic of how women characters were treated in comics, just kind of baggage that could be violently killed off to add extra emotions to the male characters' stories. Now that is referenced here in this issue, which is from, looks like this is from 2000. So yeah, the era of blogs is a few years off in the future, but once blogs started up, people would reference back to that, I guess. And in this issue, it turns out there are parallel universes, one in which Kyle Rayner is the Green Lantern and his girlfriend is killed, and one in which his girlfriend is the Green Lantern and Kyle is killed. So they're both working through the same trauma and talking about this. It's an interesting issue. I'm not really sure where this goes, but there we go. Then we get Green Lantern Rebirth. So Hal Jordan eventually comes back, partly because nobody ever stays dead permanently in comics, and partly because I think around this era, 2004, DC was under editorial control that really wanted to bring back the classic lineup of the superheroes. So bring back, you know, the classic meaning Silver Age, the classic Silver Age lineup of the superheroes. So there's some continuity which has taken place over the last 10 years between 1994 and 2004, which is on Wikipedia and is also briefly summarized here. Hal Jordan has inhabited the body of the Spectre, who is a pre-existing DC character, which is the Vengeful Spirit. Because he's a Vengeful Spirit, it's making him do stuff that he doesn't want to do. His friends are trying to save him. Batman does not trust the old Hal Jordan. And I think this is going to be a storyline, or sorry, not a storyline, a theme which is going to play through with the next few years. Batman's antagonism to Hal Jordan. Batman never forgives Hal Jordan for what had gone on, even though it's later established that they were parasites or something. Now, the issue just kind of ends here on a cliffhanger, where there's a number of story threads introduced, but it's not clear what's happening. And that's, I guess, because this is one of 6. And again, we don't get the whole story. In this case, I understand that there's probably not enough room to include all 6 issues. And you can go out and find, you know, DC wants you to go out and buy that graphic novel collection elsewhere, I guess. Okay, there are still 2 more issues I haven't talked about here. But I'm gonna call it good here. So, yeah, I've talked about most of this book, and that's good enough. So that is Green Lantern, A Celebration of 75 Years.